Okay, good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Welcome to Predictive Success in our webinar series. So today's discussion provides a spotlight on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We'll get started in just a minute to let folks filter in. Okay, great. We're seeing folks filter in now. We'll get started in just a minute. Okay, great. Looks like we have quite a few folks here. So just a quick intro. I'm Kellyanne Leahy. I'm the VP of Operations here at Predictive Success. And for those who may be new to Predictive Success, our focus is on talent optimization, designing dream teams, and hiring and inspiring with data. So firstly, I want to acknowledge that February is, of course, Black History Month. And the 2022 theme for Black History Month is February and Forever. So celebrating Black history today and every day. So we are incredibly excited to bring this session to you. We have two fantastic panelists today. So with us today, we have Veronica Utton, who is the facilitator and DEI expert at Predictive Success and managing director at V. Utton and Associates, and Dr. Dorothy Nyambi, the president and CEO of MEDA. So MEDA is a Canadian headquartered and international economic development organization that creates business solutions to end poverty. So let's get started. Now we have an agenda up, just a brief agenda. So after introductions, we'll get into level setting on some critical background information, which will be followed by our panel between Dorothy and Veronica. And then we will have time for questions at the end of the session. So if you do have questions as we go, please feel free to either email Alyssa or enter them into the chat or enter the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Now, I know some folks have submitted questions in advance. We'll do our best to get through as many as we can. Next slide, please. That's great. So just a reminder, Q&A box at the bottom of your screen for questions. We have decided to enable the chat function for today's discussion. If you have observations or you have insights, please feel free to use the chat function. And then as a general reminder, this session is being recorded. Now I'm going to turn it over to Veronica to share some more information about herself and Dorothy and get us started. So over to you, Veronica.
Thanks, Kellyanne. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for taking time out of your day to join us for this important conversation. I myself have had an opportunity to work both domestically and internationally, and had the opportunity to experience diversity and inclusion in its various forms, both here in Canada and abroad. And today I have with me Dr. Dorothy Nyambi, President and CEO of MEDA. And Dorothy herself has had quite an illustrious career, I will say, both here and internationally. So Dorothy, welcome, and thank you for joining us for this conversation.
No, thank you, Veronica, for the welcome, and glad to be here.
So just to set some context around our conversation, we will be looking at diversity, inclusion, and belonging as we see it here and as we understand diversity to be those differences that we know are unique to each one of us, whether it's around our race, our ethnicity, our gender, our sexual orientation, those things that we can readily distinguish between each other. And of course, inclusion is what I like to call being invited to the party, whether we are being invited to share our perspectives, to contribute to the decisions that might affect us in the workplace, but being able to participate in a full way. And of course, that belonging is the feeling of actually staying until the end of the party. Do we feel comfortable that we are being accepted when we come as our full selves? Next slide, please. Just a little bit of statistics to ground in some evidence. We certainly know that those companies that are diverse, that spend time fostering an inclusive environment, they're 70% better positioned to capture new markets. Next slide, please. and to just enunciate that in a recent study with Queen's Smith School of Business, that innovation is that much higher, 19% higher in those companies that are spending time consciously building and creating those inclusive workspaces. And we certainly know that it takes more than just one person to lead the charge. Every one of us inside of these organizations have a stake in creating spaces where everyone can feel welcome. And so certainly we know that many businesses and business leaders are grappling with just where to start in their DEI journey. And we know that organizations like MEDA have learned that transformative change happens from the inside out. Dorothy, perhaps you could just share with us your path that has led you to MEDA.
Well, thank you, Veronica. And again, thank you to the Predictive Success team, for inviting me for this very important conversation. I want to just frame it by saying that, my contribution today is really going to be grounded in my own personal journey. And that journey for me started, as a child born in Cameroon in Africa, and who desired to become a medical doctor. And I did become a medical doctor. And I feel really humbled and blessed that I had parents who could help me achieve that dream. But very shortly, as I worked in that particular sector, I realized that, I had a choice of either just staying there and you wait for people to get sick, you try to fix them and throw them back up. So I can say that, my journey towards, finding myself, say, the leadership of MEDA has not been a straight path. As a Black woman and as a woman, I come into this conversation with coming from a nexus, and a point of intersection where there's racism, there's sexism in that journey for me. So I believe that it has really been a journey of, I'll say, lots of trials and error, but a lot of what I call support. And this support has come for me from a variety of places. It's come from me, from people who look like me, and it's come to me from people who do not look like me, so speak like me even. So I want to say that, my journey has not been straight. It has not been easy. It's been full of challenges, but a lot of learning. Mm-hmm. The other piece I want to say, which I want to say is that, when you think about DEI, the narrative, the help that is out there is on the assumption that the head of an international development, not-for-profit organization is a white man or a white woman. So that's where the help goes. They say it needs to come from leadership. And for me, it's really clear. I always say, just because I am the leader at MEDA doesn't mean that, we don't have diversity issue, we don't have issues of racism, because one person can do it all. We need a system, the whole organization to change. And we cannot go and start to think about what do we need to do outside if we cannot authentically look inside and inwardly.
And on that note, I'd like you just to share a little bit about the history of MEDA, a little bit of its mission and its vision. Mm-hmm.
So MEDA was, started, more than 60 years ago in 1953. And it's a fantastic organization. I want to say that I was drawn to MEDA because having been in international development for almost 25 years and realized that you need everybody, but more than so, and anything else, you really need organizations that bring a business perspective, to the work. And how do you look at everybody's situation, whether in poverty or trying to get themselves out of poverty, and say, what's a business opportunity to help them get themselves out and continue? And I think our mission of business solutions to poverty is something that highly attracted me. I mean, it was founded by the Mennonites, in 1953, but we are an organization that is open and welcomes each and everyone who shares in our values. And I think that value and our mission is something that we want to ensure that it is inclusive. It's not just inclusive because we say so. It's going to be inclusive by how we act, how we interact, what we say, and how we do what we say we do.
Mm-hmm. And after 60 years, why is it that MEDA is on this DEI journey now?
I wish I knew, but all I can say is that when I was hired in 2018, it was, the search committee for the CEO, which made up of board members and non-board members, there must have been something that I brought to the table that excited them, my vision, my strategy. I looked at the world in 2018 and things had changed so much. And I truly believe that an organization that is, plus 50 years old, it already has the structures and the foundations. And if there's any organization that is going to be able to weather and anchor what it means to be futuristic, what it means to stay relevant in our sector, especially given the kind of work that we're doing in innovative finance and business solutions to poverty, it will be MEDA. So I think I put my trust in MEDA, and the board put their trust in me. And I can say for sure that, I'm terribly excited about the potential of what an organization like MEDA can do.
And how does the DEI journey help to facilitate what it is you hope to achieve? What do you hope to change through your journey?
I think, for me, Veronica, it's about, there are three things. The first one for me is about being authentic, and authenticity is what I bring. I bring myself, who I am. I feel strong about the person that I have become. And I want to bring that true self in my thinking, in my appearance, in what I say, in that way to the table. So just being authentic for me is really important in the DEI journey as a leader, and for all my colleagues, in the leadership team, all the staff at MEDA, it's so important that we come to the table with authenticity to be able to address the DEI issues in a manner that is not about performance, but it is really about sustainable change. The other thing that I think it is really, really important to bring to the table when we look at the DEI journey, and which has been one for me is what I call agility. Is being able to say, where are the roadblocks? And how can you help and do things that will help you go over the roadblocks rather than let the roadblocks pull you back? And so being agile, being able to see those roadblocks and then seeing opportunities as well is the other thing that I say is really important. The third thing for me, which I think is important in the DEI journey, and whilst it may sound a little bit cliche, I'll say, is just having a high level of emotional intelligence. Be able to read the organization, read the sector, read the people, right? So we work in a sector where when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's not about us having a leader. It's about people living from the global north and going to exercise knowledge somewhere in the global south to help, women and men learn how to coexist. And earlier in my career, I probably bought into that narrative, but as I grew mature and changed and learned more, I certainly dismissed that narrative because, like, a friend once told me, he said, everybody is doing something in the world. We know what, the Americans did, the Canadians, China is doing their own thing. As Africa, what's going to be the legacy that Africans can leave? And I think, and I agree with him, that one of the things that we can do and live this well is to teach people what it means to coexist. If there's one thing that I think I'll speak as Africans, as Black people, we know how to do, is the understanding of coexistence. Most of the wars that we fight are all wars that are secondary to another person's interest. Left alone, people would coexist. Mm. And I think that sense of coexistence is the other thing that I think we'll bring to the table. So for me, that journey is really looking inwards, making sure that it's an individual journey. It's not about the organization. Each individual in the organization needs to go on their journey, be authentic, figure out what agility means for them, and figure out emotionally what that means, for them as an individual. Then let's bring it to the organization to help the organization move forward.
And recognizing that, this is not one person's work. Your board of directors has certainly had a role to play. Can you tell us a little bit about how they have translated their views through the organization?
Mhm. No, very important question, Veronica, because like for any not-for-profit or charity in Canada or all around the world, your board of directors is your body that governs the institution. And I think it is so important that, as a leader, and especially for me as a person of color and a Black woman, that I feel, the support of the board. And I would say very specifically that I've been terribly excited by the MEDA board. When people would go to the website and they will say, oh, the MEDA board is not diverse because they're looking for diversity of color. I would say my experience has been, this is a board that has been brought and showed me what is diversity of thought. They've shown me what does diversity of respect, how to respect somebody who is not like them, doesn't look like them. And so with that, it has allowed me to be able to continue to be grounded in the journey that MEDA can go on, to be able to lead. So we don't only just talk, we're not here to check boxes, we're actually here to transform an organization, no matter how gradual the steps. But if we don't do anything, silence can never bring any kind of change. So we talk about it, we face it in the face. And just as you said, it cannot only be me. I haven't surrounded by an ELT that is very strong, that really believes in the work that, we need to do to become a stronger, diverse organization. And the staff at MEDA, they've all been working really hard to make sure that it's not just about the talk, but it is what are the real actions that we are going to take. And I just want to wrap this piece up to say the journey of diversity, especially for international organization, is not just a journey that we need to take in the global north. Our colleagues and partners in the global south really do need to go on their own journey, because our sector is ridden by colonialism, by colonization, whatever those words mean, but people's mindsets have been so tarnished and changed generations over generations that no matter how much we shift over here, there's a lack of trust and belief in the global south that we really mean it. So it has to happen on both sides.
So given the enormity of this task, where did you start and how did you know where to start?
Where did I start? Like every leader, if you go into an organization, I always say I got the luck and really humbled that I went into MEDA at a time when it was time to start to think through the next strategic plan. And so it wasn't just about coming in and saying we need to change, but we had an opportunity. The context around us in 2018, 2019 had vastly changed from what it was in 1953, 1970, 63, the 80s, the 90s, and even the early 20s. So I think for me, the starting point was taking the opportunity of what I was given, which was the opportunity to go through some good strategic thinking, which we went through. And that was in 2019. At the time when we just, finalized our key directions in our strategic plan, remember 2020 had not yet happened. We didn't have COVID. We didn't have the calls for racial justice. George Floyd was still alive. And so when all these things then happened in 2020, what it really did for us was give us some good tailwinds, because the things that we're talking about, now we're forced to plunge ourselves into. And I think it is so critical as we move forward that we don't snap back, right? It is so, so critical, because it's so easy to say, oh, it was COVID, it's 2 years, and we can go back to what business as usual, or, George Floyd was just another person will still happen and life will go on. So I think that this was some of the things. So the starting point was around the strategic plan, but because I came in believing that, we need to work differently, we need to do business differently, we need to engage and partner with the global south differently. We've achieved a lot. And so let's leverage it. Let's not act as though nothing has happened over the past 60 years.
And so how did you engage teams, both here in the North and in the Global South?
So as I said, our sector is a sector that is built out of, I'll just use the word, colonialism, but not because people can choose to be colonized or people can choose to be oppressed sometimes. And because of that, I think it was first for me to have the conversation at the ELT executive leadership team level, because as a leader, I'm just one person, but the organization is led by a team. And not every team is along the same path or they agree. And so with that, certainly not everyone at the ELT believed that it was the right direction to go. There was also the conversations around why shouldn't we focus our work so that we get known for some key things that we do and then we can do them well. And so I think for me, that engagement started at the ELT level, didn't come without challenges. Actually, for me, it came with significant amount of challenges. And, the word resilience keeps coming up. And sometimes I think it's a good word. Other times I think in this DI space, it's a bad word. It almost means that you can be disrespected, you can be undermined, and yet they'll say you're resilient. Right? So sometimes I don't look at resilience as a good word, but yet when they talk about leadership, they always talk about you need to be resilient. So that consultation started there. And that was the first part. The second part was absolutely having a good facilitator, an external facilitator to help us have some difficult conversations and work with us. And the third part was making sure that whilst we had the conversations around the issues that will define our strategic plan, that the board was included, that the board was not left out. So there was a steering committee, the board was part of it, and there were working groups in which board members, fitted in as their time permitted and as their skill sets allowed and their interest. So it was a combination of things. It's been a journey, it's been a process. The strategic plan is in its second year, and I'll say it's a marathon to the finish line. We're working together. It's not as though everybody is at the same place, but at least I think at this point, we're all heading in the same direction.
And of course, hindsight is always 2020.
Absolutely.
Now that you're, 3 years into your plan, what do you wish you had, what do you know now that you wish you had known earlier?
What do I know now that I wish I had known earlier? I think I'll say there are two things. The first thing that I said, I will say I wish I had known earlier or done earlier for me would have been to just ensure that these strong, honest conversations happen very early. And with that, for me, the second thing would have been to, as a leader, and I'm a feminist, and so sometimes there are trade-offs. I want to get everybody's point of view. I want to get many people involved. And so what's the trade-off? People interpreted, they said, oh, I was confused, I cannot communicate. And so I could see myself going the cycle of a Black leader. And so with all of that, I think in hindsight, for me, would have been not less consultation, but more specific direct consultation. And the second thing for me in hindsight would have been, I would say, make some decisions sooner. Because if we're all going towards Montreal or want to go to Montreal, and some people are going to Vancouver, other people are going to Indianapolis, some are going to Accra, Ghana, my job is to convince everybody why we should go to Montreal. It doesn't matter, you can be going by plane, by car, I understand that. But I think if everybody tries to go in their own direction, then you end up with a fragmented organization. And for me, it was really key. And that was for me some of the learning.
So what would you today offer leaders who are on the fence about DEI being a strategic imperative?
I think that, again, I want to frame this to say, I need to say, who am I offering this thing to? Because if I'm offering this advice or my experience to somebody who looks like me, talks like me, is going to be very different from somebody who doesn't look like me, doesn't talk like me. So, but in general, I want to say, people just have to be authentic. It cannot be a box that you check. It has to be something that starts from within. It has to be something that within the organization, because the issue of, Black women or people of color being in leadership is there is no process or no clear path to how you build the pipeline together. So I said I started as a medical doctor. I came back, other things, I had some good luck in my path, some challenges in my path, but I'm here today and I say, how do you build a pipeline so that there are other leaders who can come up and everything, and really be honest with them, and not just have more people who look like me because it looks nice for the corporate picture. It is so, so important that we go past that and really sink into what is real. And the reason I say so is because when you bring diverse voices to the table and they really come to the table, you're going to be a stronger organization. You're going to be a better organization, and it is the right thing to do.
Thank you, Dorothy. We're certainly willing to and hoping to receive some of your questions. So Alyssa, if you wouldn't mind just checking in on the questions that are there that we can respond to.
Yep, we have a question that's filtered in, and I'll just read it out loud. We have a diversity, inclusion, and belonging committee at our organization. We are a trade association. Some of our board believes we should be focused on our core mission and not get involved in social justice issues. We are pushing forward, but how do I respond to this after shaking my head?
No, thank you for that question. I'll jump in, and then maybe Veronica can also jump in. I think, it's a good thing to have a committee, but, after the incidents in 2020, there was a plethora of every organization had a committee, every organization wanted to do training. And that leader understands, who their board is. And I'll certainly say, maybe there's room for them to say, if they're a trade organization, how much trade can you do if that voice of diversity comes to the table? How do you link that with the value that they bring, right? So, and for me, when I joined MEDA, there were some who thought I was a liability. And how do I make sure that they see me as an asset? And it is that balance between thinking that diversity is a liability, and how do you help your board to see that it is an asset? It is an asset to your business. It's an asset to your business model. It's an asset to your mission, your vision, and you're just going to be stronger, better, and do more.
I think the one comment I would add is certainly we understand that there's often a bit of pushback, a bit of misunderstanding, a bit of fear in stepping out into new territory. But I think the biggest question that you could be asking your leadership team is to think about, as Dorothy mentioned, what business might you be missing out on if you are not open to expanding your markets, if you're not open to expanding your talent pool, if you're not open to introducing and establishing opportunities for even those within your organization to have more of a say on the work that you do. If you're looking for longevity, certainly we hear from millennials, and your millennials are those individuals that are coming up in the ranks. And the research tells us that 86% of millennials expect their organization to be diverse. This is how millennials have grown up. And so they expect to see this when they enter into organizations. In fact, Glassdoor did a bit of research not much long ago and tell us that 2/3 of candidates are actually holding diversity and equity as a criteria in accepting opportunities, new roles with organizations. And so what talent might you be missing out on if you are eliminating those kinds of opportunities inside of your organization?
Great, thank you. Another question. Do you think setting targets of diversity, for lack of a better word, are a good way to build a pipeline of diversity? So the question is about setting targets and building that pipeline.
Yeah, I think, I mean, my response generally to that is that for people who've never been given a chance, for people who've never had the pathway, there's a certain level of how an organization can hold itself accountable. But what is most important, every organization wants the most qualified person to step in to do the job. I've not been given the job at MEDA because I'm a Black woman. I was given this job in 2018. There was no COVID, there was no George Floyd. So sometimes I have to step back and say to myself, if it was in 2020, how would I have interpreted it? So it will be different. So I really believe that target may be a sense of accountability, but at the end of the day, if everybody coming to the table is given an equal chance and an equal opportunity, and I mean, those who are even interviewing, you need to see diversity there, because if you are interviewing and everybody is of one race and they're interviewing diverse candidates, that's not it. So you need to bring people to the table who understand even what kind of questions that means. You need to bring people to the table who understand what lived experience means, right? So there are so many pieces of it. I think it's not one or the other. I think it's important to be held accountable to set targets, but it is really important to say you're getting the qualified person. They happen to be a person of color, they happen to be a woman, and that's who you're getting to come and do the job.
And I think to add to Dorothy's comments, what I would say is, while targets can be helpful, they're measurable, they're quantifiable, I would be more concerned about the environment that the individual is going to land in. Is the organization actually ready to hear diverse voices? Will they be open to receiving perspectives that aren't the same as theirs? And what kinds of systems inside of the organization will be there to support and enhance that individual's experience? I've certainly worked with some organizations of late, and they talked to me about setting these targets, but then they were surprised when individuals promptly left the organization. And when you dig deep into understanding why they left, there was not a welcoming environment. They did not feel as though they belonged. Their perspectives and their viewpoints weren't respected because they were different. And so you really have to work from the inside out. First, take care of how you are managing your operations inside the organization, then invite those individuals who might be different and offer a different perspective than what you're naturally accustomed to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, fully agree, Veronica, that sometimes you could invite, and you set targets and people come and they don't feel included. And again, it's really about, the power analysis. Diversity and inclusion really calls for people to share power. It's not enough to just bring a different kind of human being, but are you willing to come to that power table and actually share the power and give up some power so that another person can own it and gets to do something better than you can do it, and you recognize it?
Thank you. Just a question in the chat from Naz. Thank you, Dorothy. From what you have seen and experienced in the global South and North, what do you think are some additional or overlooked opportunities of authentic and systemic engagement to level set the power dynamics and scars left by colonialism, leveraging diversity, inclusion, and self-empowerment?
Hey, Nas, thanks, and nice to see you on at the webinar. I want to just say that when we talk about, as organizations in the not-for-profit charity space, the one stakeholder that we cannot leave out of this are our funders and our donors. So I bring them in, really important, because it's really sometimes about he who pays the piper calls the shots, but it is because if we don't even figure out where we get our resources to get the work done, it will be so difficult for us to shift that dynamic. So whilst we're sitting in the global north, we can decide and say we want to do this thing, but without bringing our donors, funders, who gives us the dollars, who gives us the resources to go out there and do the work, it will be very challenging, to actually make the shift happen. Again, as I said, on the other side, it's work on both sides, Nas. We really need to continue to say in the global south, brothers and sisters who are there, how do they shift their own mindset to have more faith in themselves, to trust their own work that they can do, and that because they live in the situation, they have the best solutions, right? So I think some organizations call it subsidiarity. So how do we stop designing the work here, in the middle of the snow belt and go and play it out in the middle of the Sahel? Right, so it just doesn't work. So I don't know if I answered your question well enough, but those are some of the things that I feel we must bring the funder into the picture, and they also need to move and shift how they actually use their money. The last piece I want to say about funders is that when funders, institutional, private donors, when leaders like me come on board, people of color, it is well known that funders drop off, right? We don't come with the trust or the agency that they think that we need to have. And I am challenging funders that in order to support diversity, they should actually support and give more to leaders like me, so that we can help to actually do the work, get the support that is needed, so that these organizations get strong and that they're being led by leaders who come from different diverse backgrounds.
Okay. We have a question from Jennifer that's been submitted in the Q&A. In what ways has MEDA's internal DEI journey changed the ways in which you engage with stakeholders you serve, and vice versa? How have your stakeholder engagements impacted your team's internal DEI journey?
No, thanks for the question. MEDA has always done the best it can in order to be authentic in its DEI work. But I think that, one of the key things we're doing in our strategic plan is overall understanding what it would take to shift power from the global north to the global south, and that power exchange. And because of that, our GDI journey is such that it's no longer just about, specialists in the global north trying to work in the global south. They form different communities of practice. We're bringing the voices of our partners and others to the table much earlier than maybe they used to be done before. We're making sure that our partners in the global south understand where we are going to as an organization. So I think it's small, incremental, but I would say for me, it is actually concrete, the things that MEDA is trying to do, so that our GDI journey is really laden and laced by very specific examples of what we can do. For example, we used to hire a lot of our corporate office staff in Canada or in the United States. Now we are hiring corporate-based positions, and they can be based anywhere in Africa, they can be based anywhere in the world. So that already is a certain level of inclusion and diversity that we're bringing to the teams that wasn't there before. Finally, I just want to say, undergirding all of that, we're working to make sure that our policies and our processes all come in line to support that and prevent the guardrails, so nobody is set up to fail.
Great, thank you. So if anyone has any Q&A or questions, please enter them in the Q&A box. I will be shifting to the questions that were submitted in advance shortly. We have one more question. It's a clarifying question for you, Dorothy, and it's from David. David asked, you said people can choose to be colonized. Can you please expand on this?
Okay, so I'll say that people can choose to be colonized because, you know, and as I said, I was born in Cameroon, in Africa, and it is not unusual that, you know, somebody just wants to keep their job and they'll tell you, oh, I just cannot do this. So they give this person from the global north the impression that they need to help them do their job when they can actually do that job. So that's where I say sometimes people choose to be colonized, and it's not because they don't understand. Sometimes they just want to keep their job. Sometimes they just want to make, you know, some boss that they have in another part of the world happy. Sometimes they choose that it is not that fight, right, that they need to fight. And I normally give the example of the 3 cakes. You know, when I worked in the field, we always used to say, and I worked in the field in the heart of the HIV/AIDS crisis, there were 3 kinds of cakes, you know. So I will be working as a health program officer in a country, and partners can come from somewhere in the global north and they'll say, this is the cake we have baked, you're going to take it and this is how we're going to manage HIV. So that was like a cake. The second kind of cake was, they will come, they already knew the cake they wanted, and they'll come and pretend and waste their time and tell you that they're consulting with you. And then after that, make you eat their cake. And the third group was the one that will come and would say, I don't know how this problem is evolving here. Let's sit down together, map out a solution that we think would work, and then let's put the resources together so we can get it done. And I think, you know, if I sit and somebody comes with the first kind of cake and I just do it, I've just let myself be colonized. And I say that because I have gone through that journey myself. I have let myself be colonized because I was in that part and time in my career where I probably needed the job. I didn't have enough voice. I didn't feel I had the agency. I felt like sometimes you needed to be invisible to survive. So it's a journey, but it does happen. And it will be different for everybody.
Great, thank you for clarifying. That's very helpful. A couple questions were submitted in advance. And one question actually was submitted 3 times. So it's here. I know DEI is critical to my company. As a white male, I am terrified of getting it wrong. Do you have any guidance for me?
I was going to let Veronica jump into that one first.
You know, certainly I've had my career span in both the nonprofit and the private sectors here in Canada. And I applaud you for wanting to go down this courageous path. And certainly in my time, I had mentors who were more senior white male. And I'll tell you that even if you stumble along the way, don't quit. I would say take that courageous step. You will make mistakes, but you can recover from those mistakes, assuming that your intentions are genuine and authentic. So no one expects that the road is going to be without its bumps. But what I always tell my clients is to stay silent is to perpetuate the system that currently lives. So if there is a genuine and authentic intention around making change, just put one foot in front of the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think I certainly support what you've said, Veronica. Just to say, I said, don't be afraid of critique, right? It is the fact that you want to do it, you know, just go in ahead and do it. As I said, we never improve in silence. So you can do it. And sometimes it is the failing and stumbling that's going to make you strong, make the organization strong. I mean, as a woman of color, Black woman leading an organization, my coach, you know, is a white male, and, you know, we're about the same age. And I have 2. I have a Black woman and I have a white male. And I really value what they all bring to the table and what they give me and what I get out of that relationship. So I'll also say that, you know, as a leader, you know, get yourself some coaching, get some support that you may need, you know, to help you work this journey.
Great, thank you. Good advice for all of us. Question for you, Veronica. As a DEI facilitator, do you have any advice for moderating heated or very uncomfortable conversations?
Oh, if you had been on a fly on a wall on some of the conversations that I have, they have most certainly been heated. But it's important to have the conversations. It's important to understand why the heat elevates and escalates. And I think really it's about creating a safe environment for individuals to bring those concerns forward, to bring their perspectives forward. Yes, you need to manage it in a delicate way, but you do need to allow individuals to walk their journey. We all get to a place of understanding, a place of inclusion in different ways and in different time. And so if that individual is open to exploring, it's a good sign that they're actually open to having the conversation, and hopefully through those conversations and through their own personal education, because you do have to educate no differently than you would educate yourself on any sort of medical approach, or if you're learning a new sport, you're going to educate yourself on the game itself. Similarly with DEI, there is some education that needs to happen, and the individual themselves has to take responsibility for bringing the unconscious to the conscious.
Dorothy, is there anything that you would add?
Nothing, more to say, just to say that, it comes back to that authenticity for me. It is looking at things in the face, and maybe for me it's a cultural thing. I'm direct, and maybe it's part of learning and building that resilience over time. But I think having difficult conversations is, like Veronica said, you must have them. You can't keep pushing them under the carpet. They don't go away. They just will boil up, higher and hotter somewhere else at some other time. So as a leader, I want to be able to say, I want to create stability, but sometimes, if something is too stable for too long, then something is wrong, right? It doesn't mean that things need to be jerky all the time, but it is really important to have those conversations in a safe way and in a way that is values driven, right? So it's about how do you do it authentically and with respect.
Absolutely. One question filtered in about change management. So somebody had said, I know people move up and down through change curves. Should DEI be handled differently in bringing people through a change journey? Who wants to start?
Do you want me to go? I'm going to tell you that change is change. And most certainly there's a cycle that individuals will go through as you navigate the changes that are going through the organization. So with any change, you've really got to have your communications clear. What is it that you're changing, why, and how does the individual benefit, and how is the individual affected by that change? You have to bring people along in conversation, include them in ways that allow them to have a voice through the process, but be very clear on your timelines and when you expect things will be shifting and how they are expected to shift with it. And let's be clear, not everybody will be coming along with you on that journey. Some individuals will be brought to a fork in the road where they have to make a very conscious decision about whether this is still the organization that they feel that they can support and that their values align with. So there will be individuals who make that decision that perhaps the organization is no longer for them. But I suspect you stand to gain more than lose when you move down this path of change. But most certainly, it is a change that goes through that cycle, and be mindful that you will be bringing humans along in that cycle, and they are at different speeds. They're moving at different speeds, different levels of acceptance, and different ability at which they can accept the change when they need to. Dorothy?
Yeah, I just want to add, absolutely agree with Veronica, and I just want to put it in the context of international development, where we want to change, there's that, it's a shift in mindsets, right? So change itself, there are all kinds of theories and framework about change this, change leadership, let's communicate, but if it doesn't start at the individual level and the buy-in and mindsets can shift, there's no way that the organization can even change. And so I think, again, like Veronica said, is, what am I going to lose? What does this mean for me? And as much as possible to be clear about that upfront. And one of the questions that Veronica asked me at the beginning, that if I were to go back and look hindsight 2020, what would I do differently? I think it is really having those bolder conversations and just being really clear with everybody upfront, this is what it means for you. Because I think we've gone through a journey at MEDA that suddenly needed to happen, but could have been shorter.
It's powerful. The what's in it for me framework rings very true. Appreciate that. A question that's submitted about organizations that have done a good job at driving the DEI agenda forward. So a question for both Veronica and Dorothy. Which organizations have you seen that have done a good job at driving the DEI agenda?
I will start. I will say, and I'm not saying it because I work for MEDA. I've worked for many other organizations, and I'm saying it, really authentically, because there's very little things that I say that I don't believe in. I don't really say anything I don't believe in. That, for me, as I said, the board, giving that space for the conversations to happen, for us to do what we're doing, I think for me that MEDA is a good example. It's not about the talk. We're working quietly, doing the policies, doing and struggling and learning as we go about this journey. So we're not talking about how we've done it well, but I think me sitting inside and seeing how much we're struggling in our journey, for me, it's a good thing. And for me, an example of an organization that is on the right path.
That's helpful. Thank you. Veronica, anything that you would add?
I don't know that I should call out this organization's name specifically, but most certainly there's a medium-sized community-based organization in Ottawa, and they were struggling with where they should start in terms of having these conversations. And we always suggest that the conversations start at the senior level. Because if the senior team is speaking language and having expectations of their direct reports that they're not familiar with, it can be confusing. And so we started with this senior team, and I have to tell you, the executive, the CEO, put himself vulnerably on the table. And I believe that helped to accelerate the DEI journey in this organization. The CEO did not shy away from the tough conversations, did not shy away from the pushback that he knew he was going to get, but he showed immense leadership in moving the DEI journey forward. And eventually, it was a conversation that we were able to cascade right throughout the organization, and they have seen some of those what I call coming to Jesus moments, but fewer than what they had expected they would see. And certainly they're on a road to taking a look at their systems, at their internal mechanisms, to ensure that not only looking in, but outwardly as well, that they are truly walking their talk.
That's great. Both very good examples. Thank you for sharing. So just keeping an eye on time, I know we're almost at time, and I actually didn't get through all of the questions that were submitted in advance. So for those who submitted questions that we didn't get through, we'll be sure to follow up with you. So just, I want to say thank you to you, Dorothy and Veronica, for sharing your wisdom today. Dorothy, I loved your quote about inclusivity. It's about how we act, how we interact, and how we do what we say we're going to do. Really powerful. I'm going to turn it over to Veronica to share some concluding thoughts. And again, thank you. This has been a fantastic session. I hope everyone got as much as I did out of the session. So I'll turn over to you, Veronica.
Just simply to say that, we are coming out of this pandemic, and employees have shifted. Their expectations of their employers are much different than they were a year, even 2 years ago. And we know that our millennials are the up and coming, and they're expecting much more than what we've given them so far. So my challenge to you, should you choose to accept it, is what will you do different to foster a more inclusive work environment? Thank you so much for joining us today. Dorothy, again, thank you so much for your insightful comments. And if you are interested to carry on this conversation, feel free to reach out to me at the coordinates you're seeing on screen. Thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.